see all your bright smiling faces, but unfortunately the grins escape me through all of your masks. Well, welcome. If you are new here, if you are a visitor, we have these green cards in the seat backs in front of you. It's a very long reach now. It used to be real close. If you could fill out one of these in lieu of any offering or donation or anything and put that in the offering box back by Mr. Greg, it's the green box in the back next to the sound booth, that would be wonderful. And if you are a regular attender and you have an offering or something, you can put it in our offering box back there as well. Now, I think we have a slide for this, although I didn't prepare one. Perhaps Luke did. But today is our first time of starting a transitional Bible story out in the playground. So we're working towards getting a Sunday school going in lieu of all the things that are going on in the world around us, but we're not quite there yet. So we're working on it. And what we're having is a Bible story back in the playground back there, and so you can take your kids back there. It's for ages 3 to 5th grade. So you're welcome to take your kids there, and they will be brought back to you when worship starts. Or, sorry, not when worship starts, but yeah, during the 3-minute break. So you'll have your kids be brought back to you into the old foyer, and you'll be able to pick them up there. With that, if you have children and you want to stay inside, the first 3 Sunday schools are available. There's TVs in there, and we'll be live streaming the message to it, so you'll be able to listen to the message and see the message from there, as well as your kids can play in those rooms. Every Sunday from 11:30 to 1, so right after service, we have a middle school group for 6th to 8th graders happening here at Cedar Creek. So if you have a 6th to 8th grader, you're welcome to bring them after service and hang out with the other middle schoolers. And we also have Awana clubs, which have started back up this year with some modifications. That's happening every Wednesday from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So if you're interested in that, you can go to our website, or you can talk to Ryan or Nikki Rudak, the two who are in charge of that. And one last thing. After service today, we got all those kids back there for the Bible story. We're going to be replacing about a dozen of the railroad ties. So if you feel strong and willing to help us move a few railroad ties, we'd be really grateful for your assistance. So with that, I'm going to introduce Mr. Rob Gerber, who's going to be talking about creation.
Okay. Well, we are in we started, you got me, Greg? We started a series here last week, and it's called Christian Non-Negotiables. And we just to very, very quickly try to catch us up a little bit. I know I can't do the whole message from last week, even though I'd like to. Just to catch us up, last week we talked about why we're talking about this at all. And the point of this series is we're talking about some beliefs, some things that you and I, in my opinion, my reason for doing this series is I think that there are some beliefs that you and I as Christians need to hold on to. We need to trust them, we need to accept them, and we need to live our lives by them if you want your Christian life to go well. If you don't grasp these things, if you don't understand and hold on to these truths, and if you don't make decisions based on them, you are going to struggle in this world as a Christian. That's what we talked about last week, and we compared these beliefs to like anchors for the foundation of your soul, the anchors for the foundation of your faith, and we looked at, foundations can be seem solid, but they can shift. The foundation, this foundation here, it's concrete. It's just thick concrete, but the frost can make a shift, and so we need these foundations, things that go down and they're outside of the forces around us. Because just like a foundation here on this building can shift and crack and buckle, and when it does, the whole building starts to be off. It starts to lean. It can collapse. That's true of our faith as well. You live in a world that once you've accepted Christ and you understand that you're God's and you start to live your life that way, you live in a world with all kinds of forces that are trying to undermine that foundation. You live in a world that is constantly beating against the foundation of your faith, and so it has to have these anchors that are outside of that, these anchors that go down to the bedrock, and they're unshakable. So that's what these things are. These truths are those unshakable foundations that will keep the foundation of your faith from cracking and buckling, and it'll keep your Christian life from collapsing. We also looked at it like train tracks. And it seems dogmatic, right? I have to believe these things. Every Christian has to believe these things. That seems so absolute. It seems so there's no options there at all. And my response to that is, yep, exactly. It is. It's absolute, and it's like train tracks. If you take a train off of the tracks, it has no power. It can't go anywhere. And without the tracks, that train can't make that curve there, and it goes down into the valley. Trains have to run on these tracks. And when they run on the tracks, they have great strength. You can see great beauty. You can go places. Trains are amazing things, but they have to run on the tracks. Your Christian life has to run on certain tracks. Otherwise, if you get off those tracks, either you're just going to sit there, and that train's not going to move, you're not going to be able to steer, or if you are going fast and you get off those tracks, it's a train wreck. Your Christian life turns into a train wreck, okay? So that's what we talked about last week. Now, today we're going to start with what are those foundational truths, okay? What are these things, these non-negotiable truths that a Christian needs to have? And if a Christian has them, it will anchor the foundation of their faith, and it will keep their Christian life moving forward powerfully and well. What are they? The first one we're going to talk about today is this: God created. God created. The Bible isn't, we're going to spend obviously lots of time looking at the Bible. The Bible begins and pretty much ends with this thought. Very first verse in the Bible. I'm reading mostly out of the New Living Translation today. Genesis 1:1, the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It starts with that. Then it pretty much ends with it. Back in the book of Revelation, there's 22 chapters in Revelation. Revelation 21. At the very end, it's that verse, Genesis 1:1, is talking about when the world first began. This, Revelation 21, is talking about when the world is ending. Everything we see is ending. But it says this: Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and old earth had disappeared. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven. Verse 5, and the one sitting on the throne said, Look, I am making everything new. So the Bible begins and ends with this idea that God created. He made what we see, and He's going to make what's coming next. God is the creator. God is the one who puts everything together. That's the foundational truth that I think we need to have. Now, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that here this morning, okay? So when I say God created, I thought it'd probably be good to define that term. Here's what I mean by that. God created means this: that all you see is crafted by God. Everything you see, the chairs in front of you, the trees out there, the light, the colors that you see there. There's lots of different colors around here. The people walking by, that family walking by out there. Look, everyone look. They're all moving. Everything you see, absolutely, without exception, everything that you can see and touch and feel and smell was crafted by God. Let me read this verse to you in Psalm 33. Verses 6 through 9, it says, The Lord merely spoke, and the heavens were created. He breathed the word, and the stars were born. He assigned the sea its boundaries and locked the oceans into vast reservoirs. Let the whole world fear the Lord, and let everyone stand in awe of Him. For when He spoke, the world began. It appeared at His command. That's what we're saying here. That the world, the heavens, the physical world that you see around you, it wasn't And then it was because God spoke. God said something, and he created it. He made it. What you're seeing, Mark's got his arm around his fiancée. That fiancée was created by God. And so is the desire in Mark to put his arm around her. You didn't know. See, you sit in the front row. That's so bad. The emotion was created. We are created by God. Isaiah 64, verse 8. It's not just the world around us. Each one of us. And yet, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay. You are the potter. We are all formed by your hand. Okay? So when I say this foundational truth, this non-negotiable truth that you as a Christian have to believe and live your life by, if you want your faith to remain firm, if you want your Christian life to go well, God created. What that means is that everything you see, all you see, is crafted by God. Now, there are some things that are true because of that, or there are some things, maybe the better way to say it is that statement has a lot in it. That statement has a lot of things that are implied or must be true if that's true. Here's what they are. First, this, that the world around you, God did this. He made the world with purpose. Or he had a reason for it. There's a reason for the world around us. God created it. God made it. But there's a purpose to it. In other words, he built it for a specific end. He didn't just make it because, for no reason. There was something that he wanted. God thought, there's something that I desire to be. There's something that I desire to happen. And so he thought ahead, and there was a reason for the world that he created. There's a reason for you. And that takes imagination, right? It takes the ability to see something that isn't and to imagine it. God has imagination. I want that thing that isn't here, and I can see it. There's a purpose to the world around you. There's a purpose for you. If God created, if God made it, one of the things that's true, that's built into that, is God did it on purpose. There's a reason that God made it. Here's a second thing. There's a design to it. The world around you, the people you see, there is a design to it. In other words, it was crafted based on that purpose. Okay? If there was a purpose, this is what I want, well then, God designed it to meet that purpose. And he said, I want this result, so I'm going to design a world, I'm going to design people that will go and meet that result. Does that make sense? It's like if you want this building, I use this a lot, but that new building over there, we wanted a new building. It wasn't here. We thought there are reasons we want that new part of the building. And so then it was designed and the blueprints were laid out. Because this is what we want, we imagined it, and then somebody designed it. Well, here's how it's going to have to be. That took intelligence. That took intelligence. God designed the world to meet the purpose that he had imagined, but to design it in a way to actually meet that purpose, it took intelligence. You had to think about it. I'm going to have to do this and not this. I'll have to make this and add this to it and not that. So there's purpose, there's design, and finally there's process. In other words, he formed it based on the design. Okay? There was a purpose. He imagined what he wanted. Then he designed it to meet that purpose. And then he made it. He formed it based on the design. This took skill. It's one thing to say, okay, this is what I want, and I think I even know how it should happen. But then he was able to make it happen. He was able to create it. It's like this lamp. This lamp sits in my right next to my easy chair, and every morning I get up and I read by this lamp. And this lamp is similar to that. In other words, it was designed for a purpose. Well, the purpose was what? To give light. It's a dark corner in my house. You need to have light in that corner. So this had a specific reason for being designed. It was to give light. But then someone had to think about it and think, okay, if I want to give light, I have to have something that'll make light. So there's these light bulbs in there, and there's this thing called electricity, and so there's a power cord here that brings electricity up, and the electricity goes up here, and it goes into those light bulbs. And so when I turn this on, it works. There was a design, and there was skill in crafting it. You know, it doesn't fall over. It's solid. It sits there. When I pull the little chain, it actually works. I can turn it on and off. And it's pretty. It's got imagination and colors in it. And these are dragonflies. And it's a neat thing. It's a cool thing that was designed for a reason. It was designed intelligently and skillfully. The world around you is like that in a much bigger scale. On a much bigger scale. God had an idea. This is what I want. He imagined it when it wasn't there. Then he designed it. He used his understanding, his intelligence to know this is how it's going to have to be. And then he created it. He made it. He formed it. Okay? So here is the foundational truth kind of restated one more time. It's this. God alone imagined, designed, and made everything. God alone imagined, designed, and made everything. There was nothing, and he imagined something. He was able to put together a plan to make that happen, and then he created all of the raw materials and put them all together in a way that we see what we have now. Does that make sense? And it's interesting. God alone, I think that's important to acknowledge that I'm saying that here. This idea that God created means that God alone did it. And what that means is that God didn't have to go and get resources from somewhere else. He created the resources. God didn't have to go and get ideas from somewhere else. He had the ideas. Everything was within him. It's interesting, that verse in Psalm 33, do you remember what it said? It said it 3 times, that God created the world by his word, his breath. He spoke it into being. He didn't have to go to Menards and go to the build the world section and find the things he needed. Everything he needed, he imagined it and he spoke it into being. He alone, God alone, imagined, designed, and crafted, made everything that you see. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, Christian, is one of the foundational truths that if you want your Christian life to not collapse, if you want your Christian life to go well, to be powerful, to be what God wants it to be, what I am saying is you need to believe this, you need to accept the truth of it, and you need to live your life as if it was true. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that again and again and again because I want to be clear about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I am saying absolutely, you must, as a Christian, believe, accept, and live your life as if this were true. That's part of the train tracks that you have to run your life on. That's an anchor that goes down and keeps the foundation of your faith strong. Now, I realize something. I realize that statement, God created, especially if we're defining it this way, that God alone imagined, designed, and made everything, that is perhaps the most controversial of these 3 truths that I'm going to talk about. Probably the most controversial. I think it's also perhaps the most foundational. This one, if you don't get this one right, everything is going to be a struggle for you as a Christian, I think. So here's what I'm going to do. For the next few minutes, we're going to talk about those two things. We're going to talk about the controversy, and we're going to talk about the foundationalness of it, all right? I'm going to start with the controversy. Why is this a controversial statement that God created? Well, here's why, I think. You and I live in a world that says this, that science has disproved God as creator. The world we live in, remember we said that part of the reason we have to hang on to these things is because there's a world around us that there are forces that want to beat against these foundations of our faith. And the world we live in has made this statement. Science has disproved that there's a creator at all. And this has been going on for generations. As a young boy, I can remember seeing this picture in school. And most of you probably saw that in school, right? I mean, that's the march of humanity. And I can remember, as a young boy in grade school, being shown this, that's how we came from. I wish I looked like that guy on the end. He's tougher and better shape than I am. But you can see, started off as a monkey, and very slowly we evolved. We were told, I was told, I suspect all of us were told, this is scientific fact. This is science. And we know this to be true. Therefore, what I said before is not true. There was no design that God spoke into being because we now have proven something else. We have proven that that's not true. We have proven that these things I talked about in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. Science has proven that that's not true. That's what you and I have been told. That's what I was told as a young boy. That's what your kids are being told. That's what you and I are hearing all the time. There are myriads of men and women who are scientists, who are experts, who say things like this. This is Richard Dawkins. I don't know if you can see that. I'll read it to you. It says, the evidence for evolution grows by the day and has never been stronger. At the same time, paradoxically, ill-informed opposition is also stronger than I can remember. This book, this is an introduction to a book he wrote. This book is my personal summary of the evidence that the theory, in quotes, of evolution is actually a fact, as incontrovertible a fact as any in science. I mean, he's making a strong statement. He's making a strong statement. And what that statement is this. There are people who believe in a creator. That's the ill-informed opposition to evolution. And if you know anything about Richard Dawkins, he spends much of his time specifically trying to refute the Bible, Christianity. The things that I said that God created, he scoffs at that. And so he is saying something here. That science has proven it's an incontrovertible fact that there is no creator. So when I say to you, God alone, by his own volition, with his own power, with his own design, because he chose to do it, created the world around you just the way he wanted it to be, created the person sitting next to you just as he wanted that person to be. When I say that, it flies directly in the face of this. I'm saying the exact opposite of Richard Dawkins. In fact, I would go so far as to say this. Richard Dawkins says that basically I'm ill-informed. He's being kind there and saying I'm just ill-informed. Well, without trying to be mean, I would say this statement is so absolutely false, it's embarrassing. It's laughable. Now, how can I say that? Well, it's a controversy, right? Who's right? Who are you going to believe? Richard Dawkins or me? Well, I would suggest to you that maybe you don't have to listen to either one of us. I want this message today is not, we don't have time to get into this controversy. I would desperately love to. I told the guys in that we have a production meeting every Sunday morning, and we talk about what the service is going to look like. And I said, I need an hour and a half today. And they said, no. I didn't even ask. I know. I know better. We would need several hours to talk about this. But this message today, we're talking about these non-negotiable truths and why they're important to a Christian. I want to acknowledge the controversy about this truth, but we're going to spend most of our time talking about why this truth is important to a Christian instead of a controversy. But I do want to make this statement and give you some reasons. I want to acknowledge that the controversy is out there, and it is real, and it is intense, and it is powerful. And many of you, I'm suspecting, are perhaps much more inclined to believe Richard Dawkins than me. I suspect that that's true because we have been told this. We've seen that picture our whole lives. That wave has crashed on the foundation of our thinking our entire lives. And so we tend to think, well, he's a scientist. Why would he say that if it wasn't true? Let me just give you something to think about, and then I'm going to give you some resources where you can think about this some more, okay? Here's what I want you to think about. I'm saying that this is absolutely false. Here's why I say that. Because the evidence for evolution, the evidence that he talks about there, the evidence of the theory of evolution is actually a fact. That evidence is not science. Let me show you another quote here. This is by a man named George Wald. George Wald lived in the same world that Richard Dawkins lives in. George Wald believed strongly in evolution. George Wald did not believe in what we're saying. He did not believe that God created heavens and earth. He believed that it came from somewhere else. He bought into the Darwinian explanation of where the world came from. But he was honest about something, and I'll read this quote to you. It's long, listen to it, and I will explain a little bit. The reasonable view, he's talking about where did life come from. That's where it was an article in Scientific American in 1954 called The Origin of Life. That's what he's talking about. The reasonable view of the origin of life was to believe in spontaneous generation, which is the Big Bang, evolution. When he says spontaneous generation, it's that whole thing, that it came from natural causes. The only alternative to believe in a single primary act of supernatural creation. That's what I'm saying. So he's saying that there are two options: spontaneous generation, which is at the base of evolution, or creation, which is at the base of Christianity. There is no third position. For this reason, many scientists a century ago chose to regard the belief in spontaneous generation as a philosophical necessity. Stop and think about that for a minute. Stop and think about that for a minute. Is a philosophical necessity scientific evidence? It is not. It is not. Most modern biologists, having reviewed with satisfaction the downfall of the spontaneous generation hypothesis, that's science language for saying we tested that and it ain't so. There is no spontaneous generation, yet unwilling to accept the alternative belief in special creation, are left with nothing. This is a scientist who gave his life to this. He does not believe this at all. I think and so having said that, this blows my mind. Having said that, this intelligent man with more degrees than you and I will ever have said it's either creation or it's spontaneous generation. We have studied spontaneous generation forever, for a century. We know it isn't true. but we philosophically will not believe in a creator. Therefore, I am going to believe in what I know is not true. That's what that quote says. And he's not the only one. Men and women who believe in this say this stuff. Read their works. Read their books. They all admit this at some point. Here's the thing. This is not science. It's a philosophy. You know what it is? It's a religion. I believe in God. That's the beginning of my belief system. They chose, I do not believe in God. That's the beginning of their belief system. Everything they do starts from that place. They use science to try to validate their position, where they start from. Okay, we all do that. I do that. I'm starting from a place where I believe God exists. They're starting from a place where they believe God doesn't exist. So then, what do? Well, you look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. And folks, I say that the evidence that you see around you points overwhelmingly to a creator. George Wald admitted it doesn't point toward evolution. Doesn't point toward that. Must point toward something else, but there is no creator, so I'm not even going to look there. Well, I think if you have your eyes open, if you are willing to be honest with the evidence, I say to you that the evidence points overwhelmingly to a creator. Now, this is where I would love to talk for hours about this. And I did. Long ago, we did a series called An Expert Opinion. Where did it all come from? And we talked about these exact issues. We have put a link to both of those messages along with my PowerPoint slides on the website. So if you go to today's message on the website, there you'll find links to those two messages that we gave several years ago, where we spend 2 whole messages talking about filling out what I just said. That the evidence, if you're reasonable, if you're rational, science, the evidence points toward a creator. Now, I'm going to leave this with this thought. If you are one of those who, like me, starts from the standpoint that I think there is a God, don't be afraid to look at the evidence. Don't be afraid to really dig into, well, what is it that science is saying? We tend to be afraid of that because I think we're afraid, well, what happens if I discover that it's really true that evolution is true? What if I discover that I believe in God, but all of the scientific evidence points towards something else? Look, don't be afraid of it. God is not afraid of the truth. If God is real, He is not afraid of the truth. Because what am I saying? He created it. He built it. So He's not afraid of it. If you, Christian, believe in this, don't be afraid to look at the evidence. Now, here's the second thing I'm going to say. If you are skeptical, if you're sitting here today, or if you are listening to my voice, and you are skeptical, and you really think, I don't know if that's true. I think that the scientists really maybe have disproved God, or maybe the evidence points towards something other than a creator. Then I challenge you. I challenge you. I double dog dare you. And I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. Look at the evidence. Read it. It's all out there. Easy to get. Easy to see. Easy to find. Look at it. See, the world around you, science, everything points toward a creator. I am very willing to have this conversation with you. I just can't do it right now. So, we're going to switch gears. This thing always confuses me. And we're going to leave the controversy of this idea that God is a creator, and we're going to move on to the foundation of it. Remember I said that this truth, this non-negotiable, core value God created. It's the most controversial, but I think it's also perhaps the most foundational. I want to spend the rest of our time talking about that. Why is this such a big deal? What does it matter whether God is the creator or not? Why is it so foundational? Here's why. Here's the foundation, I think, that we get when we believe that God is the creator. The foundation is this: because God created, He has certain things. Because God created, certain things are true about God, and therefore about me and the world I live in. Because God created, certain things are true. Because God created, He has, here's the first thing that God has, He has power, or the ability to control. Here in Jeremiah 32, verse 17, says this: O sovereign Lord, you made the heavens and earth by your strong hand and powerful arm. Nothing is too hard for you. If indeed God spoke the universe into being, if He made it, then everything that happens here, or maybe I'll put it this way, in the negative, nothing that happens or could happen here is too difficult for Him because He created it. God acknowledges that in just a few verses later, verse 27 of Jeremiah 32. This is God speaking. I am the Lord, the God of all the peoples of the world. Is anything too hard for me? The answer is no. Because God created, He has power. He has the ability to control all that He created. So that means something. You know, we make these statements, but it's good to kind of step back a little bit and unpack them a little bit. Okay, if God has power, if God has the ability to control the world around me, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that for God, that God is outside of the laws of physics. This is what supernatural means. It means that it's above the laws of nature. In other words, you can do things that aren't what nature or what the laws of physics would dictate. I've practiced really hard and I've learned to levitate. I'm just kidding. I can't do it. I wish I could. Wouldn't that be fun? You've all had the dream where you're flying, right? Is it only me? You had the dream where you're flying? I've had that dream, and I'm always desperately afraid that I'm going to forget how in the middle and crash down. I don't know where that came from. The point is that God is outside of the laws of physics. In other words, He can do things that you wouldn't normally see. If indeed God created this, remember we said He spoke it by His word. He just created it by His word, His own imagination, His own design. So because He made it, He has the power to manipulate that design, to change it, to make it different than it was. He made it this way. And you and I are locked into those laws of physics, but He's not. He's above them because it's His creation. Does that make sense? If God indeed created, then it means that He is above the laws of physics or the world that, the things that we have to do, we can't escape. He can escape them. So then, if that's true, then certain things about Christianity begin to make sense that maybe didn't make sense otherwise, like Jonah, right? You read the story of Jonah. That doesn't make any sense. And people have tried to think, well, okay, what kind of fish would it be that was big enough to swallow Jonah? Or how could Jonah, what did he breathe for 3 days and nights in the belly of the whale? And why wasn't he digested? And we try to confine God to the laws of physics as we understand them. If God created, He's outside of those laws and He can change them just the same way He created them by His word. How could there be a flood? That doesn't make any sense. Where'd all the water come from? God could create it by His word. If indeed God created, If that's true, then he has power. He can control, he can change the world around us. Lazarus was raised from the dead. That doesn't happen unless you're the one who made life. And then you can give it where you want. And you're not outside, or you're not constrained to the laws of physics, to time and space. That's what we're saying. Christianity is supernatural because the Creator is supernatural, not ghost story silliness. Supernatural meaning above, in control of what's natural. He can manipulate it. He can control it. Now, if that's true of God, and if I believe that, then, remember we said that this helps me to live my life well. These truths, one of the things, it's an anchor, but the other one is it's those train tracks that help you to live your Christian life well. If I believe, if I live my life and understand that God can change the world around me, then you and I live with right expectations. Our expectations are changed, and if it's true that God can control the physical world, if it's true that God can control time, if it's true that God can control life itself, then I live with a certain set of expectations. And I expect God not only to be able to do those things, but actually to do them from time to time. And Jesus said this right at the beginning, when people first started to follow Jesus. When people first began to understand what it meant to be saved, to have a relationship with God restored again, to be a Christian, Jesus helped to give them this correct expectation. And in John chapter 1, that you can read the story where Jesus is beginning to call disciples. And he called a man named Nathanael. And I'll just start reading here in John chapter 1. Someone went to Nathanael and said, "Hey, Jesus of Nazareth is here." And he says, "Come and see for yourself," Philip replied. As they approached, Jesus said, "Now here is a genuine son of Israel, a man of complete integrity," speaking about Nathanael, who he'd never met. "How do you know about me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus replied, "I could see you under the fig tree before Philip found you." In other words, he's saying, look, I can see things that other people can't see. He's outside of the laws of physics. Then Nathanael exclaimed, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel." "Yup." Jesus asked him, "Do you believe this? Just because I told you I had seen you under the fig tree, you will see greater things than this." He was telling Nathanael and everyone else around, yes, I am outside of the laws of physics. I am different. I am the Creator. I made this. And if you follow me, you're going to see that. You're going to see it happen. Christian, understand, if you are a Christian, God operating outside of what happens normally, we begin to expect that. We begin to expect that He can. He doesn't always, but He can. So what does that mean? Well, it means a couple things. Just for me personally, long ago, I decided, God made a promise in Matthew. He said, don't chase money. Don't do it. I know you need food, I know you need clothes, but you seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. That doesn't make sense. My father could not understand it because my father lived his life by the financial principles that govern economics. You maximize your money so that you have a nest egg, so that you can retire, so that you can purchase things. If you want money, if you want those things, you have to conduct yourself in such a way as to get as much money as possible. God said something different. No, you seek me first, and I'll make money come to you. Years ago, my wife and I chose to believe that. And I can tell you, 30 years into it, it's true. But if you don't believe God can work outside of financial constraints, then you are not going to make those kinds of decisions. Does that make sense? God is outside. He doesn't live His existence cramped by what we see around us. Now, we can get crazy with this, and again, I don't have time to go into all of the balances to this, but we have to be willing to understand, Christian, that because God created, He has the ability to control the world around us. I want to show you a picture here That's lilacs. And I'm going to fill in the blanks a little bit here and carry this through. My wife took this picture. How long ago was it, sweetie? Week and a half ago. Now, if you know anything about lilacs, either she's lying, and I don't believe she's lying, or something weird happened here. Let me tell you the story behind the lilacs. She took this picture at the funeral of a very, very good friend of hers who has had MS for years and years and years, multiple sclerosis. And so she has been slowly, that's a degenerative disease, and it's been slowly making her sicker and sicker, weaker and weaker for many years. When our kids were little and we were homeschooling them, Marcia, that's the name of this gal, would come over and read to our kids. And she was sick then, and she's gotten progressively sicker. Well, she died here a couple of weeks ago, and so Sue went to the funeral. Her birthday, Marcia's birthday, is in May. So her husband, this past May, when she was pretty much on her deathbed, and they knew that the end was not too far away, they have a lilac bush out back, and they went to get lilacs for her, and there were none. The lilac bush just didn't make lilacs this year, and that was sad. It was sad for the husband, sad for Marcia. It's not the end of the world, but it's you look forward to that. I look forward to lilacs. They weren't there. Well, the summer went into the fall. Marcia died here in September. Was it the day she died, Sue? Look out the window, and the lilacs are blooming. And there's a picture of it. That doesn't happen. I have been around lilacs my whole life. They bloom in the spring. That's when they happen. Now, because I believe that God created, it is not a stretch for me to believe that God made that happen. It's not a stretch for me. If you do not believe that God created, well, then you might think, no, that's something else. That's something else. Which is right? Well, you have to decide. But I'm telling you that it makes a difference to you. What you believe about this makes a difference. Because God created, He has power. Here's the second thing it means. Because God created, He has authority. He has the right to direct. I'm going to read here a verse in Psalm 33:11. It says, "But the Lord's plans stand firm forever. His intentions can never be shaken." See, if God created the world, if God made you and I, then He owns it. And He has the right to direct it. He has the right to say this is what happens. In other words, what this means is that God is in charge. God is in charge of the world around us. God is in charge of you, of your life. Because God created you, He is in charge. So then, if that's true, certain things begin to make sense, perhaps, in the Christian life. Like God making commands. Well, He can do that because He's in charge. He's the boss. He owns the world. He owns you. He made it. He imagined it. He designed it. He built it by His own word. It's all His. You are His. And so everything around you, God not only has the power, the ability to control it, He has the right or the authority to direct it. He's the boss. So circumstances in life that you may or may not like, you may do it one way, but it happens a different way, well, God can do that. Why? Because the world is His. Because He has authority. The timing of things. I want this to happen now, and it's not happening. You're waiting. Why, God, can't I go and see you face to face now? There's all kinds of things that I would do differently, but God does them a certain way, and He has complete authority to do it that way. It is His prerogative. He does not answer to you or to me or to anyone else. If God created, and if this indeed is His design and manufacture, then it is His. He owns it, and He has the right to do with it as He pleases. If that is true, It changes your expectations. If that is true, then you and I begin to live our life in a different way. How do we begin to live our life? Well, again, you live with right expectations that you wouldn't have otherwise. In Psalm 31, just a page before this, Psalm 31:15, I actually like it here. Luke, can you put it up? This is in the NIV. It says, all my days are in your hands. All of my days are in your hands. If God made me, you know, it says in the Bible that God determined the time set for me. In other words, He knew the day I was going to be born, the day I'm going to die, and the exact places where I should live. God put me here now on purpose. I am His design. He put me here. If that's true, then my days are in His hands, which means that He has the right to direct my life. And as a Christian, if I understand God created and therefore has the authority to direct, that means me. And I begin to live my life with a different set of expectations. I am no longer the master of my own fate. I am no longer completely in charge. God has given me the ability to choose to follow or not and to make all kinds of decisions, but God has not relinquished the authority to direct my life. Christian, do you live your life that way? You know, I talked about money. I would love to retire. I'm not that old. My dad, when he was younger than me, he had enough money and he just moved into the woods, basically. And I feel that longing. I don't know if it's because my dad did it or because I just love the outdoors, but I'm tired. I'm tired of running for the Lord. It's hard to follow God, and it's hard to make these decisions, and it's wearying, and I'm weary, and I want, and there was a time a couple years ago where I desperately wanted to quit, and I went to God and said, can I quit? Can I just, it's someone else's turn, Lord. Someone else's turn. Maybe I'm not any good at this, Lord. Maybe you should pick someone else. God, I want to quit. But God said to me, no. And I read in Philippians where Paul said, as long as I'm in this body, it's fruitful labor to me. And God spoke to me and says, Rob, that's what I'm having you do. Now, if I don't believe that God is in control of my life, well, who cares what it says in Philippians? Who cares? Why would I ask God at all? I'm going to do what I want, but I do not believe that. I believe as a Christian that God created me and that God has a purpose for me. Therefore, He can direct my life. And I live my life with that expectation, and it changes things. If you do not believe that God made you specifically with a purpose, put you here now, and is directing and controlling in your life, then you will find yourself at odds with God. You'll be butting heads with Him. When He says, do this, you say, I don't want to do that. And your glass is flat. And your life will be a struggle. You will lack power. The train of your life will get no traction. Or if you fight God hard enough, you'll go off the rails and you will crash and burn. God created you. Therefore, He has the authority to direct you. Go back to the lilacs. Why didn't God make lilacs last May? Seems kind of mean, doesn't it? Marcia's dying. She loves lilacs. They went to do something nice. I said that God's in control. Therefore, God had a hand in no lilacs. Well, if you think that God doesn't have the right to do what He wants, you might get angry with that. But if you believe, Christian, no, God is in control. His timing, His circumstances, I'm going to be okay with it. Here's the third thing. Because God created, He has power, He has authority, and finally, God has intimacy. In other words, God has a reason to love. In Isaiah 43, He says this, but now, O Jacob, listen to the Lord who created you. O Israel, the one who formed you says, do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name, and you are mine. And that's speaking to you and me. God created you just like He created Israel. God ransomed you and I as a Christian. Jesus paid the price to set us free. He came to pay our ransom. This is speaking of you. Because God created you, he says this, I have called you by name. You are mine. Because God made you with your emotions, with your personality, with your dreams, with your desires, with your strengths, with your weaknesses. Because God made you, it says in the Bible, in his image, he has the ability to be intimate with you and a longing to do it. He has a reason to love you. Why? Because you're his. When my kids were born, I loved my kids. When just these little, tiny, strange-looking creatures that came to my house, I loved them intensely in a way I had never loved anything before. In a different way than I loved my wife, there was a connection, a longing, a desire. Why? Because they were mine, and I was theirs. I was dad, and they were my little girl, my little boy. And there was a love, there was a reason to be intimate. There was an ability to be intimate and a reason to love. Because God created you, there is a reason for him to love you. What that means about God is this, that God desires closeness. God desires closeness with you because he made you to have a relationship with him. You were made by God. You were designed. You know, we talked about the purpose, God's imagination for the world. You know what it was? He wanted to have a relationship with you. That's what God says in the Bible. God's purpose was to make you and me so that we could be close to him, love him, be loved by him. Because God made you, he desires closeness because you're his. Therefore, if that's true about God, then certain things about Christianity start to make sense. Like God is our comforter. God gives us comfort. God communicates. You know, why would God communicate? Why would you pray? What makes you think that you can read the Bible and hear God speaking to you? Well, that doesn't make any sense unless you think, wait a minute, I'm his boy. Of course he's going to communicate to me, right? I mean, if God really desires closeness and relationship, well then, yeah, he's going to talk to me. Of course he would. He's going to care for me. He's going to care about me. What happens to me makes a difference to God. Why? Well, because I'm his. I've told this story before, but I could tell you all about American Girl dolls. All about them. And I spent hours poring over American Girl catalogs. I don't personally have an interest in American Girls. But both of my daughters did, so I jumped into it. What was important to them became important to me. Of course you are important to God. You are his. He created you to be with him. Of course he's going to talk to you. Of course your hurts hurt him. Of course, because he is a good father. He's a good parent. And if I believe this, I begin to live my life with right expectations. You will have right expectations if you understand you are God's son or daughter. And here's what they're going to be. And we could talk about this forever. You're going to understand and you're going to feel from God affection and commitment apart from your performance. God loves you because you're his, not because you're good. God's affection for you, his commitment, his loyalty to you is based on his creation of you, that you are his, not because you perform well. I know a man, I know him well, good friend of mine, who loves his son, but his son has not lived his life wisely. His son has done foolish things. His son has ended up in jail multiple times. His son has stolen and lied. Yet this man loves his boy, and I see it, and I've watched it over the years. This man loves his boy in spite of it. Why? Because he's his. That's my boy. And he's in some ways a fool. And he's in some ways a failure, but that's my boy. And I love him. It's what God has for you, affection and commitment apart from your performance. But understand this, God also has, because you're his, teaching and correction based on performance. He will teach you and correct you based on what you do. What you do matters to God. Doesn't change his affection or his commitment, but it changes your relationship. You better believe it. Just like this man that I know has put limits. No, son, when you get out of jail, you cannot live with me. No, son, when you get out of jail, I will not give you money. Because I need to teach you. There needs to be corrections. Because I love you, I'm not just going to let you go. I'm going to try to help you live your life well. Understand, Christian, we get this so mixed up that either my performance doesn't mean anything or my performance means everything. Because God created you and you are his, they both mean a lot. God's commitment and affection for you is based not on your performance, on the fact that he created you and you're his. But because he created you and you're his, he will watch your life and he will teach you and will correct you based solely on your performance. If you're a Christian, you'll understand that. You'll understand that. And when God disciplines you, you won't think he hates you. And you'll understand he loves you anyhow. But when you mess up, you will expect correction. You will allow him to teach you, to help you be different. Back to the lilacs one more time. I believe that because God loved Marcia, he withheld the lilacs in the spring and sent them in September. Now, you can believe that or not. It makes perfect sense to me because of all the things we said. God created Marcia. God created the lilacs. He has the complete power to change when they bloom. Absolutely. He created it. He can change it. He has the right and the authority to not give them now, but he has the love and the affection to give them at a different time. God created you. That truth is a foundation for your soul. It is a barrier. It is the tracks that your life can run on and run well. I went long. I apologize. Next week, we're going to talk about the next truth, and that's this. The Spirit speaks. We'll talk about that next week. Lord, I just thank you, Father. I believe it's true that you created. You created me. You created the world around us. I just pray, Lord, that you would convince us. We live in a world that wants us to not believe that. I just pray that we would. You'd help us to see the truth of that. I believe it's true. And yet it's a struggle, Lord, and it's okay. You don't mind if we struggle. I just pray that each one of us would honestly come to you, honestly look at the evidence, because I think it becomes clearer and clearer that you created. But then, Lord, if that's true, it changes things. It says things about you, and we begin to understand who you are in a totally different way. And as we understand who you are in a totally different way, Lord, we understand ourselves. And our life begins to be different, and we live our life with different expectations. And it begins to have power, begins to have meaning in ways that it never did before. Lord, help us. Help us in that, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, folks, we're going to take a 3-minute break, and we're going to come back and do some songs.